Hi, Kiran. Welcome to the Corona Mama Zoom room.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm so excited. So, introduce yourself to us first. Tell us about your family and then what you do.
Sure, yeah. So I'm Kiran Krishnan. I'm a research microbiologist. I am surrounded in my household by two very precocious little monkeys. One is a 7-year-old girl. Her name is Bonnie, which Bonnie is a version of the goddess named Saraswati, which is an Indian goddess of wisdom and intelligence.
Oh,
And I think she embodies that a lot, but apparently there's a lot of sass that got added in there somehow too, because she is sassy. And then my son is Isaac, and he's 10. I think he's going to be 10 in a couple of months. And he's a sweet kid, very emotional, very empathetic. And his name, Isaac, which we spell Izak, actually means one who laughs, right? So and sure enough, he's got this amazing sense of humor and can find humor in most things. And of course, because of COVID, we've spent a lot of time together over the last 7-8 months, which has its pluses and minuses, but more pluses, of course. Especially considering most of the time before COVID, I spent maybe 60% of the time traveling, so I
wow.
had to be away from them a lot. So it's been really, really nice. A silver lining through all of this craziness that's going on is getting to spend that time together. My wife, Erin, is from Iowa. So almost as foreign as me, who's from who's from Malaysia and India. And yeah, we're happily here, settled in the western suburbs of Chicago. Our school districts are closed right now, meaning
Oh,
everything's
right.
virtual. So they've been homeschooling since basically end of March. And then of course summer was like normal for the most part, normal summer, but then their school districts are closed. So they're homeschooling at least till December. So that's an adjustment, and fortunately my wife was a teacher. She retired a couple years ago, but she was a teacher, and she's got her master's in early childhood. So we've got that as a benefit, but it's not easy. So I'm the one of the co-founders and chief science officer of Microbiome Labs.
I'm
Microbiome
sorry.
Labs is actually a company dedicated to understanding the microbiome, the gut microbiome, and all the biomes that surround you. So in your skin, in your mouth, in your eyes, in your vaginal canal, and so on. All of those biomes impact you profoundly. And also then, figuring out tools like probiotics, prebiotics, polyphenols, all these kinds of things that can modulate those microbes in a positive way. It's becoming more and more clear based on the existing research that just by changing the ecosystem inside you, on you, and even around you, it can really profoundly impact your health in a positive way. And certainly, if you change it in the wrong way, it can have a huge, profound impact on your health in a negative light. So the microbiome is going to be the next biggest revolution of science and medicine. It already is at the moment. Give your audience a point of reference. In the last 5 years, there have been over 50,000 published studies on the microbiome as it
Wow.
relates to health, right? So 50,000, there's nothing else, no other topic that has that much science going on right now. This year would have been, another additional 10,000 or so papers. The only thing that has kind of curbed it is that so much research has gone into COVID, right? But even with COVID, there's a number of studies coming out with the microbiome and the impact on outcomes and impact on COVID. So over the next few years, it's going to become a massive, really revolution in how we think about health, how we look at disease, and how we look at our risk for disease. There's going to be things that are today that are considered incurable, things like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, even simple things like allergies, where they say you really can't get rid of them, asthma, which is just managed with inhalers, for example, autism, these kinds of things that are basically incurable and just kind of managed conditions that will likely have a microbiome based cure in the next 5 to 7 years.
That's so
Because
incredible.
yeah, so much of it comes right back down to our ecosystem.
Yeah. So this series that I'm doing is on proactive pandemic wellness. And
Mhm.
in my mind, I was just thinking, okay, we're in endurance mode now for the pandemic. It's not going away.
Mhm.
We don't know when we're going to have a cure, if there is a treatment or something. And so being really proactive in what we're doing is really important. And I went down the list of like what I think would really make a difference. And to me, I've been hearing so much about this. And as you say, the studies that relate to just our general health.
Mhm.
And now that we're thinking about enduring whatever happens with COVID, it's like you're saying, it's a silver lining. So we have to think about our health. And it seems that Americans, especially, have not been really in a healthy mode for a very long time. And so we've been hearing about gut health a lot. We've been hearing about it here and there, here and there. And so I know that you're on a tangent, but I was just thinking like, this is why this audience is here. And we're all wondering about COVID and how to protect ourselves. But actually, there's so much more here. There's so much more. So we can start with COVID, and then we can go into all the things that will make a difference in our overall well-being here.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And gut health is really at the center of all of it, right? So, and we could talk about that in a number of different ways. One of the things that scared me when COVID first started was when you start to learn how the virus infects through that ACE2 receptor, which I'm sure your audience has heard about. That made me nervous because when you look at the American population, we are flooded with ACE2 receptor expression because of our lifestyles and our health status, right? And we could
Mm.
talk about what are the things that drive that. So this particular virus has so many more targets to infect in us, in North America, and certainly in the U.S., than it does in many other regions of the world, where they don't suffer as much of the same
Ah,
chronic issues, right? And
wow. Ding,
so,
ding.
yeah, and so our vulnerabilities are far higher in general than certain other populations. Now, there are other parts of the world that have the equal risk, an equal risk that we do, but in particular, focusing on the U.S., we've got an pretty high level of risk in our population based on how this virus infects and based on how it picks its targets in general. Now, a lot of it, the good news is we can combat this virus with our own immune resilience pretty easily if our system is functioning the way it should, right? So we know that still upwards of 40-50% of people that get exposed are completely asymptomatic, and they're totally fine with it. So what is the difference between that person and then the person that ends up in a hospital on a ventilator, right? And what is the difference between the person that ends up in a hospital on a ventilator and a few steps below that, the person that's battling this at home, being the sickest they've ever been for 2 weeks or more, right?
Right.
And the person
Right.
that still has symptoms, 2 months later. And what is the discrepancy between all of those, right? Is it just pure luck? Is it genetics? Or is it your current condition? And so we could talk about that as well, and just kind of give people an overview of what they can do. The good news is there's a lot you can do
Mm.
to be extremely resilient, and protect yourself.
That's
That's
so
it.
encouraging.
Yeah, that's why I have very, very little fear around this virus. I do a lot of precautions. There are lots of things I wouldn't do right now. There's lots of things I
Mm.
do a little bit more liberally than people that I know that are really afraid. But I take precautions, and
So
because I
you have
also
very
know
little fear. That's really
very little.
encouraging too, because you have
Yeah,
the
very little.
knowledge. so you don't
Absolutely.
have to be fearful. So we're going to
Yeah.
get all this knowledge, people.
Exactly.
And so
You
we
know,
don't have to be fearful anymore. Okay.
yeah, and it's not the lack of fear in that one spectrum where it's like, oh, this is all a hoax, this doesn't exist, it's all, the numbers all made up and all that, like that level of not fearing this.
Okay. Right.
It
Right.
is, yes, this is an actual contagion, it's a virus, it's a pandemic, it is making people sick, it is killing people. But because we understand already so much about it, we understand how it's transmitted pretty clearly, we understand how it infects, what are all the steps involved in the infection, we understand what it means when you have a really bad go of it, meaning you've got a really bad response to it. And because we know what parts of the body control all of those defense mechanisms, you can really be well prepared should you ever come in contact with it. So
Wow.
because of that body of knowledge, I have no fear of this.
That is such good news. That is such good news. I mean, I think people out there, right? We've all been like thinking this can hit any of us. We're not sure. There's so much uncertainty
Yeah,
because we don't know. And for some reason, we feel like science doesn't know and they're still in discovery, but there's enough that you do know that you
totally.
can
Yeah.
not be fearful. So that's really awesome.
Absolutely. It's all a risk-based system, right? So we take risks every day, right? Every time we get in our car, we take a risk. That's a major risk driving on the highway. But then we take precautions along the way to minimize our risk. We wear our seatbelt. We make sure our car is in good working order. We make sure it's a car that has a good safety record. We don't drink and drive. We drive on the right side of the road. We drive around the speed limit. We do all of these things to reduce and minimize our risk of having a really bad reaction to driving on the road,
Mhm.
which has an inherent level of risk. So the COVID is no different than that, right?
Mm.
COVID presents a kind of an overall risk in basically the way we live, the way we function. But there's so many things you can do along the way to minimize your risk of not only getting it, but more importantly, should you get it, that your body can handle it. And one of the things I want to demystify a little bit, when this first came out, one of the things that was being said was that we have no immunity against it, right? So that's one of the reasons why it's so dangerous. And it's true, we don't have long-term immunity against it. But what that said to people is that our immune systems are ill-equipped to handle it, right? And that is not true. Our
Hmm.
immune systems are perfectly able to handle a pathogen like this. And your immune system has handled numerous pathogens that are somewhat similar to this in the past. In many cases, you didn't even know it handled it for you, right? It happened behind the scenes without you ever realizing it. And so it is important for people to know that outside of those that have severe immune diseases, severe autoimmune conditions that have immunocompromised because of something like AIDS or cancers. If you have relatively normal health in terms of your immune function, your immune system is perfectly capable of managing this.
Wow.
Right? It's not some crazy alien virus that your immune system has no mechanisms around, and we can talk about those
Okay.
mechanisms as
Yeah,
well.
they've talked about all this like overcompensation of your immunity and all of that. And that's so it's been really confusing. I don't know if you want to go there yet, but that's something that I want to touch on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we could talk step by step what happens when the virus enters, how your immune system is supposed to respond, how it doesn't respond correctly if you're not in the right state of health. We could talk through all of that.
Okay. Okay. Were you on a tangent though? Were you? Uh,
I'm always on a tangent, actually. So,
no, a certain,
uh,
I mean, did you want to go there or,
yeah, we can go there. So we can jump right into number one, the important thing of obviously our immune health and immune function, right? And
okay,
how does that relate to the microbiome? Because that's a
right.
really important key.
And what is the microbiome? I think people need to understand what that is first, maybe.
Yeah, so that's a really important thing to define. So I'm glad you asked that. So your microbiome is basically the collection of organisms and all of their genetic material as it exists on and in the host. And we are, of course, the host. So to give you an idea, we are made up of somewhere around 10 trillion or so human cells. And we typically have somewhere around 40 trillion microbial cells in and on our system, right? So we have anywhere from 2 to 4 times more microbial cellular matter in our system than we have human cells. And we have about 150 times more microbial DNA in our system than human DNA, right?
Wow.
Yeah. So it's a relationship so intimate, we cannot divorce it. We're not just, it's not an accidental symbiosis. We have evolved as a species to harbor and utilize all of these organisms. We have outsourced lots of basic core functions to the microbes that live in and on us. We don't have enough genetic material to be human,
That
right?
is so interesting because most of us think, I am my DNA. I'm
Right.
given a set. That's who I am. That's how my body works. But
Yeah.
you're saying environment.
Yeah.
And over time we shift and that affects us. So fascinating. Okay.
Absolutely. And and here's the thing, well, what we see for the most part in terms of DNA is what we most of us see on the surface, right? So like what dictates your hair type, your hair color, your texture, your skin tone, your eyes, all of these physical things that we could see and identify, those are things that are typically coded for by our own DNA. To give you an example of that, before the Human Genome Project launched in the late 90s, early 2000s, the scientists that were working on that estimated that we should have, as a human, about 130 to 150,000 functional genes, right? Because we are very complex characters, right? We do lots and lots of reactions inside of each cell every single minute of every single day. There's a lot of complexity to exist as a human. And then as they sequence the entire human genome, what they found was that we have basically about 22,000 functional genes, right? 22,000. That's like basically a eighth of what they estimated we would have, or a seventh of what we would have. So then the big question from that came, how is it that we do all of the amazing things we do, all of those biochemical reactions, all of the molecular reactions, all of these things that occur every single minute of every single day? And then when the Human Microbiome Project launched back in 2006, 2007, we come to find out that although we have 22,000 human genes in our system, we've got 3.5 million microbial genes in our system, right? So over 90% of everything that happens in us that makes us human comes from microbial DNA, not from human DNA, right? Human DNA makes us 10% of who we are. The other 90% is from bacteria and other microbes.
Does that change over our lifetime?
It can. So what's interesting is your microbiome looks different at different stages in life. And unfortunately, for people who live in North America and in the US, certainly, your microbiome gets worse over time, thereby diminishing your functionality, right? Functionality of your metabolic system. There's a reason why, as you get older, it becomes easier to get put on weight. There's a reason why, as you get older, it becomes you get a higher risk for diabetes and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and neurological discomfort and even like basic things like muscle aches, making it harder to get out of bed. That all of that aging factor is driven by changes, measurable changes in the microbiome. There's a number of studies that have published that shows that certain features within your microbiome, like the diversity of your microbiome, dictate how long you will live. So what this garden looks like inside and on us will be one of the biggest determining factors for how long you live, how much risk you have for chronic illness, and even things like how your body's going to deal with should you come across COVID.
Yeah, we in America, if we don't travel, then we don't experience what we feel like somewhere else. And I
Hmm.
last summer went to Spain and Portugal, and I had felt amazing. I had no pains. I had no dietary issues. I actually ate sugar, drank coffee, alcohol, every single thing, because I said, I'm on vacation. I'm going to
Hmm.
do what they do, in those countries culturally, just to do it. And it wasn't because I was like excited about my trip. I was, looking at schedules in the middle of the night and like not getting a lot of sleep, but I still felt amazing. I had amazing energy. And so what you're saying about being in North America and what we're dealing with as far as this microbiome, I find that really interesting. Is there something that you can tell us about why that would be?
Hmm. Yeah. So, there are a number of things around us that really impact our ecosystems, right? And when I say our ecosystems, I'm talking about the microbes that are in us that live in basically every square inch of our body. And then the microbes that are on us as well. So on our skin and areas like that, in our hair, on our scalp, everywhere, there's microbes. And so the things that we tend to do in places like North America are things that are devastating to microbial ecologies, right? So using, for example, Roundup all over the place.
Mm.
It's sprayed on virtually everything, that most of the things that we eat, with the exception of organic things, fortunately. Many people's neighbors are spraying it all around their gardens and their lawns and all that to kill weeds and so on. The problem with that is those things all are huge disruptors of a healthy ecosystem. We use or overuse antibiotics significantly. We put a lot more antibiotics and hormone disruptors and all that in our foods. Our water tends to be contaminated, or I guess not contaminated, but they consider it cleaned with things like chlorine and fortified with
Right.
fluoride and all that, right? All of that has a huge disruptive effect on our ecosystem. So the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat, the personal care products that we surround ourselves with, even
Mm.
things around our home, like the off gassing from the glues in your carpet, and
Right.
the material that lines like your couches to prevent stains, the stain resistant stuff, all paints, all the paints around us, all of these kind of chemistries really impact our system. And one of the things that we tend to do when we're on vacation in beautiful places like Spain and Portugal is we go outside, right? We don't want to sit in our hotel room, right? So we
Hmm.
spend so much of our day outside. And because we spend so much of our day outside, we get all of the benefits of all of the positive microbial influences
Mm.
outside. We go for walks and hikes, and we might go to the beach in a place like Portugal or Spain. We might go for a hike in the woods. We might spend time around other people who are also coming in from many different regions, and you get an influence from all of their microbes. Just
Mm.
like we know now that we could potentially pick up COVID from all of them if we're all close together, the
Right.
same way we actually exchange good bacteria, good viruses, and things like that as well. So
Yeah.
that kind of engagement, that degree of being outside, all of those things have an impact. When you look at typical lifestyles of people in North America, we spend 80% of our time indoors, right?
Mm.
You would never go on vacation and spend 80% of your time indoors. You would be 80% of your time outdoors and sleeping, 6, 7 hours, getting up and being ready to go. So those are all really big factors in how your microbiome gets influenced in a significant way.
That is so fascinating to think that we, depending on who we are around, what's in our environment, that changes us as a being, like our
Yeah,
our bodies changing. So that is the microbiome. That's
yeah,
that's what makes up a microbiome.
yeah.
So then, can you walk us through how that you were going to say how that affects our wellness, or
Sure.
walk us through some steps that you were going to walk us through before. I don't remember where you
Yeah,
were
yeah,
going.
no problem. So we'll end with the immune part talk, right? Because
Okay.
that's the part that people are really concerned about. Because the question is, can my immune system handle COVID should I come across it? So we'll talk about how the microbiome influences lots of stuff, and then we'll end with how it influences the immune system. But the microbiome is responsible for producing so many of the essential compounds that we need to exist as humans. So let's take the gut-brain axis, for example. So many people have heard that saying, the gut-brain axis. What's really clear is that the gut is directly connected to the brain. And in fact, microbes have complete access to your brain, meaning they can produce compounds like neurotransmitters and peptides and things that can influence your brain function. They can produce it in your gut, send it up the vagus nerve directly to your brain, and affect how you think, feel, and respond to things, right? So for example, neurotransmitters that are positive, like GABA. If you're somebody that doesn't sleep well, if you can't kind of wind down at night, you have a propensity for stress and anxiety, that's in part because of the inadequate production of something called GABA. And GABA is produced largely in the gut. And you need adequate amounts of GABA being produced by bacteria in order to be able to, at nighttime, start bringing your sympathetic system down, increasing the parasympathetic tone, and calming down and going and getting really restful sleep, right? And then that spirals out of control, because let's say you have inadequate microbes that are producing GABA. So now you are elevated in your stress. You can't come down, so the things that bothered you all day are still bothering you throughout the night. Now, because of that stress level, you're releasing stress hormones like epinephrine and norepinephrine. When you do that, it actually increases the growth of opportunistic pathogens in your system. Wow. Those pathogens then crowd out even more the good bacteria that are supposed to make GABA. So over time, your whole ecosystem is tumbling in the wrong direction. And it becomes harder and harder to manage stress, and it becomes harder and harder to sleep and relax, right? Now, when you look at things like sympathetic, parasympathetic, which I'm sure you guys have talked about, but just to give a quick review, those are two basically neurological tones in your body, right? So sympathetic is considered the flight or fight response, meaning you're heightened, your adrenaline is kicking in, and you're trying to get away from danger. That's the response if you were in ancient times walking down a prairie and you hear rustling in the grass, and you think, oh, that might be a predator. I need to get the heck out of here, right? So you might get your body ready to run. Your blood pressure goes up, your vessels constrict, your muscles tighten up, you're ready to run. Now, people in the U.S. tend to be in that sympathetic tone too much, too hard, all the time. Yeah. When we don't even have dangers that are going to kill us, right? It's just a constant state. Now, the opposite to the sympathetic tone is the parasympathetic tone. The parasympathetic tone is known as the rest and digest component to it, right? The second part is really important, because what I just talked about with the sleep cycle, that's part of the rest, but the digest is also really important, because you cannot break down your food that you eat adequately and assimilate all the nutrients from it if your parasympathetic tone cannot be turned on effectively. When you're always in this heightened state, not only are you producing stress hormones that's increasing the growth of pathogenic microbes in your system, you're also negating your ability to digest and assimilate the healthy food and nutrients you're taking. So you're becoming nutritionally starved at the same time. Your cells are suffering. The mitochondria, the little powerhouses in each of your cell, are dying off slowly. It becomes harder and harder to produce energy. It becomes harder and harder to replace damage that occurs in your system. And overall, you start kind of dwindling down into this this state of more and more despair. And it becomes harder and harder to recover from things, right? So that's just one tiny example of how a dysfunctional microbiome could spiral you out of control. Just from not having enough bacteria that make GABA, you can end up spiraling into this state where you cannot rest, you cannot digest appropriately, you're always heightened, you can't sleep, so you're feeling always tired, you're losing alertness, you're losing cognitive function, meaning memory loss, is occurring, short-term and long-term memory loss. Your ability to analyze things and work your brain effectively is getting diminished. And then because you are more anxious and producing stress hormone all the time, you've got more pathogens growing in your system. Eventually, those pathogens will compromise your immune system, will create long-term inflammation, and that sets you up for chronic illness, right? So that's just one dysfunction.
Piece. This totally explains my what I call my pandemic poundage, how I've gained weight, because since the onset of the pandemic, I, of course, was very stressed. So I wasn't sleeping. So I wasn't resting. I wasn't digesting. I'm more inflammatory in my, my whole body system. And I've gained weight. So there's a big obesity piece to this too.
Totally. Right? Yeah. Yep. Because here's the thing, as those opportunistic microbes start to grow, one of the things that they do cause is they start causing inflammation in your gut lining, right? When you start getting inflammation in your gut lining, what happens is your gut becomes leaky. And most people have heard of leaky gut. So now your gut is leakier. And so what's happening is toxins and all that from your digestive tract that are supposed to be contained within the tube in your digestive tract are now leaking into your circulation, right? And one of the things that occurs when it leaks into the circulation is it bumps up chronic inflammation and actually swells your fat cells. It also screws up your metabolic response to food, meaning your body's ability to produce enough insulin to be able to bring in sugar into the cells and burn it off, your body's ability to burn fat, turning on something called AMPK, which is a signal to your entire body to burn fat for fuel. That signal gets diminished. Your hunger and satiety hormone levels get all out of whack because of leaky gut, and then it sets you off on this path of eating too much, right? You actually end up consuming more and more food than you normally would because your satiety signals aren't working as well. So it sends you into this thing called ghrelin resistance or leptin resistance, one of those two, right? And so yeah, absolutely, it all keeps piling on, and it's all because of an ecological change in your gut. Here's the beauty of all of this, though, right? If this is allowed to perpetuate for a long time, you're going to end up with some sort of chronic illness, right? No doubt, it's either going to be diabetes, obesity, cancer, one of the top five. But all of it is reversible at any time. That's awesome. The most exciting part about all of this, right? Because we've come to know that so many of these chronic illness processes are due to ecological changes in the body, we can change the ecology and start reversing the process. The body is far more capable of healing than we ever thought, because we had the mentality that every disease had one genetic link, right? That if you had heart disease, it's because you have a gene for heart disease.
Right.
If you had obesity, it's because you had a gene for obesity. If you're diabetes, the same thing, right? So the older mentality was that because there's a genetic component, it becomes very hard to change because you can't change your genetics. So it becomes about managing the disease rather than reversing the disease, right? Now we come to know that most of these conditions have an ecological disruption at the root cause. And if we can fix that ecological disruption, we can reverse the process and we can change things. So it's never too late. It's never too late, and it's never too little to make incremental positive changes that will eventually add up to being really profound improvements in your health.
Yeah, and with obesity being a major factor in COVID and also just a factor in this country of disease, this is a huge knowledge bomb. It's like, oh, we can actually do something. We're not built like this. And hormonally, I know a lot of women are seeing children and themselves just gaining this turgidity. Like we walk around like the Michelin Man, like, what's going on? Why are we so full of fluid or whatever it is? Right. And I know a lot of women I talk to are this way. So it's really our microbiome. It's our environment inside of our gut.
Yeah,
that is fascinating.
Yeah, and let's tie it all back to COVID risk, right? Because you brought up a really important point. When we look at COVID mortality rates, if you're diabetic, you have a tenfold increased risk of dying from COVID than non-diabetics, right? 10 times. That's massive difference. It's not 50% more, 100% more. It's 10 times more.
Crazy.
And right. And if you're obese, it's somewhere around 7.5, 8 times more if you're obese and not diabetic. If you have heart disease, hypertension, all of those things increase your mortality risk 4 to 5 times more than someone your same age that does not have those underlying risk factors. So what is it about those conditions, right? That's the really important question. At the end of the day, all of these conditions have one thing in common. And this is all of the conditions that increase your risk, not only for dying from COVID, but having a much worse reaction, like your risk for hospitalization due to COVID as well. There's one underlying thing that's common in all of them, and that's chronic low-grade inflammation. All of those conditions are cemented in this physiology of having chronic low-grade inflammation, right? Heart disease, diabetes, all of those things. Age, right? Age is another risk factor for COVID. Age is also defined in many cases as having certain degree of chronic low-grade inflammation. So why is this inflammation a factor in causing a worse response to COVID, right? That's the next question. So in order to answer that, we have to understand how the immune system works and how the immune system works, especially with regards to the microbiome, because then this becomes really clear. Okay, so let me give you some analogies. So the immune system is this highly complex system with lots of different types of cells that can defend you against a lot of different things, right? And we've got two major parts to the immune system. One is called the innate immune system, and the other is called the adaptive immune system. The innate immune system is like the fast-acting part of the immune system. It acts within hours of something new entering the body. It gets to the site of action quickly, and it starts killing stuff that's in that area that may have invaded the body. So it gets there quick, and it's very disruptive, right? Destructive. The adaptive immune system is far more of a precision tool against that specific pathogen. So the analogy I use is, imagine a big house, and the house has lots of open windows. And then what we don't want is like bugs flying into the windows, right? And there's two groups of protectors of the house. One of them is the innate immune actors, and the other is the adaptive actors. Now, the innate actors are much faster at getting to different parts of the house, right? They run much faster, they can climb the stairs much faster, and the moment they are alerted, they can get there within seconds. The adaptive people are much slower to move. They take some longer to assemble the tools that they use, and they'll get there a little bit slower. But the difference is the innate actors get to the site of action, and then they use things like blowtorches to kill the bugs that are coming in. So imagine you're in a room and there's a bunch of bugs that flew in the window. The innate actor shows up and turns on a blowtorch and starts blowtorching everything in that area. It's going to absolutely kill the bugs that came in, but it's going to burn the wall as well, right? and the thing is, if you let the blowtorch response continue, eventually it's going to burn the house down, right? So then what's supposed to happen is the blowtorch person comes in, it starts blowtorching. Then the adaptive actor comes in, who's highly specialized with that type of bug, comes and taps them on the shoulder and says, hey, I got it from here, stop blowtorching everything. And then with precision uses their tools and picks out each bug, right? So then the rest of the house doesn't get damaged. So that's basically how the immune system works. The innate is a blowtorch, the adaptive is the highly specialized. Both are very important because you do need quick response, and then you do need precision, because if the quick response continues, it'll burn your house down, which is your body, right? So what is happening in the case of COVID? So so that's two parts of the immune system, and we'll talk through what happens when the COVID virus enters. So one of the other parts that's really important to note is that inside your body, you are covered with this system called a mucosal system. right? That mucus lining, right? Before anything can actually enter your circulation, it has to go through the mucus lining. So every part of the inside of your body is covered with this mucus system, whether it's going in through your eyes, nose, mouth, through your urogenital tract, through your skin, it's going to enter the mucosal system first. Now, we used to think of our skin as the largest barrier in our body, right? You can look at it, we have a lot of skin on our system, but we've got a total of about 2 square meters of skin, right, in our bodies. Compare that to about 400 square meters of mucosal surfaces inside our body. Wow. And for all of those that are in North America listening to this, 400 square meters is a little over 4,000 square feet, right? Wow. Think about that as a home. We would all be ecstatic to have a
nice home.
Exactly. We're living in a lap of luxury, right? All of that square footage in a 4,000 square foot home is folded up inside your body. That's
crazy.
Right?
Okay.
And that it's absolutely mind-boggling. Yeah. And it's all that mucosal system. Now, every square millimeter of that 4,000 square foot space is covered with microbes. So bacteria, viruses, fungi, and so on already, right? And think about who's invading our system when we get sick. It's bacteria, viruses, fungi, and so on. So the area that your immune system has to monitor, that mucosal surface, that 4,000 square feet of surface area, is already covered with the types of organisms that are the things coming in to make you sick, right? So how in the world is your immune system going to monitor all of that? And then when you look at the number of immune cells that you have compared to the number of microbes that already exist in your system, it's a ratio of 200,000 to 1, right? Every immune cell has to monitor over 200,000 microbial cells to ensure that they're friendly microbial cells and not something that's coming in that your body has never seen before, or something that has previously made your body sick, right? So the analogy I give there, if you want to really wrap your mind around the arduous task that your immune system has, imagine you're in a big outdoor festival in like a stadium or a big, huge park, and there are 200,000 people in that outdoor festival. Very few of us have actually been to an event with 200,000 people, right? 30,000 people is a massive event. So imagine a massive event with 200,000 people. Out of that, 5 people are potentially harmful to the rest, meaning they've got some ill intentions, they've got some things with them that could make other people harmed or sick in some way. And you are the lone security guard in that sea of 200,000 people. And it's your job to find the 5 out of that sea who could potentially harm others, right? It's an impossible task. Okay, so then how does the immune system do it? Well, the only way you would be able to do it as a security guard in that system is if the other 199,995 people were your eyes and ears to what's going on around you. And they were all radioed in to you, right? So if any of them see anything suspicious, they radio in and they go, I'm in this location, you need to come check this thing out. And then you can make a beeline for that area, right? That's how the immune system works. The microbiome, all of the microbes that inhabit that 4,000 square feet of surface area inside you are the eyes and ears of the immune system. The immune system cannot monitor your entire system, all of that surface area. So the microbes in the local area, let's say in your nostrils, right? If the virus enters in and gets into the mucosa in your nasal passage, the microbes, the normal microbes that are in that area, assuming you have the good microbes, what they're going to do is sense that change in the ecosystem, and then they're going to signal to your immune system that, hey, something weird is here, you need to come check it out. And then the immune system will then get recruited to come to that area to check out and see what is going on. And typically, it's the blowtorch guys that show up first, right? And they'll start blowtorching everything in that area. Now, assuming they come quick enough, they might totally eradicate any virus that showed up there. They will damage a little bit of tissue, but that's fine. Your tissue will repair. But that's how you end up being asymptomatic. Your microbiome in that area has alerted your immune system quickly as to the presence of a new virus. Your immune system reacts quickly. It blow torches everything in that area, and then it kills off the virus and its ability to replicate. The virus is basically controlled, and then any damaged tissue gets repaired. You never even feel a thing, right? You have no idea all of that amazing stuff just happened inside you.
That's why a lot of young people don't have a lot of problems, because they have that ability with their health.
Exactly. Now, here's the fundamental part of that whole thing working the way I described. It's inflammation, okay? So I mentioned in that analogy in that festival, everyone's radioed in to you as a security guard, right? So then the question is, what is the signal that the microbiome in that local area uses to get your immune system's attention? It uses inflammation. So it shoots off inflammatory flares, if you will, right? And because of those inflammatory flares are pretty loud, your immune system notices it, and many parts of your immune system, especially the blowtorch guys, hone in on the inflammation signals. And they make their way to the site of action through that signaling using inflammation. Now imagine if you had inflammation everywhere in your body. The signal that microbiome is trying to send when something invades gets completely drowned out by all the other inflammatory system signals in your body. The immune system takes much longer to make it there, right? So that is why conditions that have chronic low-grade inflammation that I talked about before, heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, and so on, why those people have a much worse go at it. Because here's what is allowed to happen. The virus enters in, it starts invading cells, right? Because the virus, for your audience, that if they don't know, it has to hijack cellular machinery in order to replicate itself. It can't, by itself, replicate and multiply. So it comes in, it starts infecting cells on your nasal passage lining. Now, as it starts infecting cells in your nasal passage lining, what is supposed to happen is your cell, the cell that got infected, is supposed to shoot off inflammatory signals to try to help everything get alerted. The microbes that are around that area start shooting off inflammatory signals. It's all distress calls that, hey, something bad is happening here. We need your help, blowtorch people, right? The problem, and then if that happens quick enough, the blowtorch comes and stops the whole thing. Now, if it doesn't happen quick enough, that one virus infects that cell. Within a few hours, it's made hundreds of copies of itself. That cell kind of blows open, all of those viruses get released, and then each one of them goes and infects another cell. And then each one of them makes another couple hundred copies of themselves. That blows open, they all go out and infect more cells. So what happens is that if you have too much inflammation throughout your body, your immune system is much slower to respond to that site of action because the signals from that distress are getting drowned out. And because time goes on for longer, you get a much higher viral load being replicated in your system. Then the virus starts moving down from your nasal passage, down into your airway, deeper into your upper respiratory part of the tract. Then it starts getting into your lungs. And then at that point, maybe your immune system notices it, right? And so then now you've got a huge viral load in your system. Now, when the blowtorch guys come, they panic because now there's so much virus, there's so many infected cells, they start blowtorching the crap out of everything, and then that sends you into the spiraling cytokine storm. Now, the immune response to it is what is making you sick and actually shutting down your organ systems, damaging your organ systems, and so on, right? So it all is dictated by that first phase of response, right? How quickly can your immune system get there based on the signaling from the microbiome in that local area? Now, here's another connection to the microbiome. The blowtorch guys that get there fast and use blowtorches, they need a lot of energy, right? Because they're very quick. They run, they burn a lot of energy all the time. And they're zipping around throughout the body all day long. And then anytime they have to use a blowtorch, they're burning off a lot of fuel. The fuel for them personally to burn off getting around, and then the fuel for the blowtorch also comes from the microbiome. If your microbiome is inadequate, it's not producing enough fuel for
Oh.
your immune system, because your immune cells don't produce fuel very efficiently. They are not like your other cells, like your muscle cells that have tons of mitochondria that can produce their own energy. They depend on outside sources of energy because most of their mechanical systems are based on systems to kill stuff, right?
Mm.
And so they've got a whole bunch of different tools in their system than like a muscle cell would. And so they're dependent on outside sources of energy. One of the main sources of energy they need comes from the microbiome. So now if your microbiome is inadequate, and we can talk about what makes a healthy microbiome and how you improve it. A, your immune cells will not be adequately fueled to even do their job. And B, should you get an infection, your microbiome is not turning on the distress signals like it's supposed to, and any virus or bacteria that enters the system is allowed to replicate much more frequently, much more robustly, so that you end up with a much larger viral or bacterial load of whatever pathogens entering the system. So in the cases where people are overweight, diabetic, older, and they have dysfunctional microbiomes, they also end up having high degrees of low-grade inflammation. They have compromised immune response. And another tie to that is compromised microbiome leads to leaky gut. Leaky gut is the biggest source of chronic low-grade inflammation.
Mm.
So a compromised gut messes up your immune response and makes your gut more leaky, makes your body more inflamed.
It's like a whole circle.
It's a big circle, yeah. And so it's all connected. I mean, there are studies by the American Diabetic Association showing that leakiness in the gut and a dysfunctional microbiome is the primary driver of the development of type 2 diabetes and obesity, right? That's the primary, root cause driver. And so when you consider that, and then you consider that a dysfunctional microbiome is creating inflammation, and at the same time, it's also dismantling the ability of your immune system to function, it's a double whammy to having a bad response.
Mm. Whoa. That just explains so much. So much. And so it comes down to the microbiome and inflammation and giving those little guys enough energy to do their work.
That's exactly right. And, we all know about things like vitamin C and zinc and magnesium and echinacea and all of these great herbs and micronutrients. All of those things help your immune system, right? So where most of those help is they help with certain mechanics that your immune system requires in order to do its job. However, one of the things I try to explain to people is no amount of vitamin C, no amount of vitamin D, no amount of magnesium will overcome a dysfunctional microbiome, because your microbiome and your immune system are so intimately connected. When one is dysfunctional, the other cannot function the way it's supposed to, right? So as you're thinking about improving your immune resilience as we go into the fall, where flu becomes more prevalent and rotavirus is going around and all these things that are concerning all of us, what we need to make sure we're doing is, of course, taking all of those things. I take all of those micronutrients as well. I'm happy to talk about all the ones that I take to help my immune system. But then you also need to make sure your microbiome is healthy, that your gut is not leaky, because you cannot afford to have that chronic low-grade inflammation going on. You're not stressed, because stress not only is caused by a dysfunctional microbiome, but because you're stressed, it'll further feed and create more of a dysfunctional microbiome. Because remember, in a stressed out state, more pathogens tend to grow, right? So it messes up your microbiome even more. You cannot afford to not get adequate rest. And again, without a healthy microbiome, it's hard to get adequate rest. Mm-hmm. And you cannot afford to not have healthy metabolic response, meaning if you're making the right food choices and you're trying to eat healthy, you need to be able to absorb those nutrients. You need to get the nutrients out of the food, even if you're taking supplements and all that, right? In order for your body actually to utilize those and assimilate them into your system, you need a healthy gut, a healthy microbiome. So that's foundational. Without that, everything else becomes compromised.
Okay. Well, how do we get a healthy microbiome?
Yeah.
Next question.
Yes, that's the golden question. There's a couple of features of the microbiome that denote health, that denotes health, right? One of the key things is the diversity in your microbiome. The more diverse it is, meaning how many different species you tend to have within the microbiome, the healthier you tend to be and the more functional, for example, your immune system is, right? So what you want to do is get more and more microbes functioning in your immune system. One of the key ways of doing that is just increasing the diversity of your diet. Now, you've got all kinds of microbes that live in your gut, and many of them eat different things. And as you increase the diversity of your diet, you actually feed larger and larger groups of microbes, so you get more and more growth out of different types of species within your microbiome. One of the things I recommend all the time to people is to go to like an ethnic grocery store. If you go to an Asian market or a Middle Eastern market, you'll find roots and tubers and vegetables and fruits there that you don't find at Whole Foods and your regular grocery stores, right? Even something as simple as like the different types of broccoli that you can have, right? You've got the conventional broccoli that everybody knows about, the green giant kind of broccoli, and then you've got Chinese broccoli, and you've got Korean broccoli. You've got so many different types of broccoli. You've got broccolini from which is used in Italian cooking, right? And all of those are different enough in their structure that they feed slightly different types of bacteria. So just adding in a little bit of diversity into your diet goes a long way. And I'm not saying become an amazing Korean chef or an Asian chef or anything like that. I'm just saying go to the grocery store and pick something you've never really eaten, whether it's a star fruit or dragon fruit that you've never really eaten, mangoes that you may never eat, or type of root or tuber, bok choy, or something that you may never eat, and add one or two of those things to your diet each week. You don't have to do it every day. You can just do it once a week. And then the next week, keep that thing that you added this week, but add something else. In a few weeks, you would have really expanded your diet, at least the types of things that are going into your system, that it really will have a positive impact on the diversity of your microbiome, right? And it's a simple thing everyone can do. You can even add a diversity of nuts, for example. If you're always eating cashews, like I love cashews, but I try to, switch it up and eat some other things, right? And eat some almonds and a few other things. Again, all of that goes a long way towards adding diversity. Another way of increasing diversity within your microbiome is the cheapest way, and that's actually not eating for a period of time. A little bit of intermittent fasting.
Intermittent fasting.
Yeah, it's counterintuitive, right? You would think, okay, feeding is really good for the microbiome, but as it turns out, there are lots of bacteria that do really well during periods of fasted states. And so if you're doing 14 to 16 hours a day, most of it through the night, it can really expand the diversity within your microbiome. So that's an easier thing to do. Doesn't really cost anything. Another thing you can do is go outdoors. I know for you, fortunately, being in a gorgeous paradise of a place, you've got lots of options to go for hikes and even just on the beach, getting in contact with the beach and the ocean. There's microbes in the ocean. But the more you can go outdoors into natural environments, the more you pick up microbes from the outside environment.
Do you say various environments? So like one day go to this side of the island, another day go to this side, go to different beaches?
Absolutely. Because, like, for example, I have friends that surf every day and they're like, I'm outside every day. I'm like, well, yes, and that's a good thing, but you're not getting much diversity in your outdoor exposure. You're in the same beach, same surfboard, same area, same waves every single day, right? Go for a hike every once in a while in a canyon, right? Dig a garden, dig a hole. It's just fun to dig a hole in your backyard, for whatever reason.
When we can travel again, travel more.
Absolutely. Get out there more, that kind of exposure has a very positive impact on the diversity of your microbiome and your immune system. The other aspect of it is getting more sleep. So sleep is a really important repair state within your microbiome. When you go to sleep and your mind actually turns off, or at least your conscious mind turns off, there are signals to your microbiome that turn on certain housekeeping bacteria that kind of clean up your system. They also then trigger house cleaning genes in your own cells. things like mitophagy genes or autophagy genes. These are genes that turn on to clean up cellular debris, damaged DNA, proteins that are not needed, things that would get in the way of clear cellular function, and it kind of cleans up the system. But you need to have adequate amounts of sleep to be able to do that. It's not going to happen if you're sleeping 3 or 4 hours a night, right? You need a little bit longer than that. So duration of sleep is really important. The span of a single duration is more important. Like, for example, if you got 10 hours of sleep by sleeping 2 5-hour increments, it is not necessarily better than getting 1 7-hour increment, right? Because all of these systems kind of build up. The moment you wake up from that 5 hours of sleep, you actually shut down all of that repair stuff. And then it's not, the next 5 hours is not long enough to turn it on again.
I heard between 10 and 12 are the important times. Is that true?
The hours, you mean?
Between 10 p.m.
Oh.
I mean, 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. are the important hours of repair. Is that true?
It depends on when you go to bed. That's really highly dependent on when you go to bed. You can turn on all the repair mechanisms. Let's say you go to bed at 1 a.m., right? You're just somebody that's always been up later, but then you sleep all the way till 10 o'clock in the morning. You've gotten 9 hours of really good duration of sleep. Your body will do all of that repair stuff in that time period as well, right? So you don't have to stress about when you're falling asleep. And I see a lot of people do that when they go, okay, I need to sleep from, 10 to 7 or 10 to 8 or whatever the time they set themselves. And then at 10 o'clock, they're not really sleepy yet. They've been doing lots of stuff and been relatively active up to that point. And then they're getting stressed that they can't fall asleep. And the moment you start getting stressed that you can't fall asleep, you're not going to fall asleep.
Right.
It's like my son just yesterday, right? We had this amazing day of lots of activity. We were outside like 80% of the day because it's still a little bit beautiful here in Chicago. And then we played all kinds of stuff all evening and all that. And then he finally gets to bed. We force him to go lay down at like 11 o'clock at night almost, because we have school this morning. And he's just laying there. And every 5 minutes he comes back out, Dada, I cannot fall asleep. And I'm like, stop trying to fall asleep. The moment you start trying to fall asleep, you will never fall asleep, right? I said, just lay there, close your eyes, and just think about random things. Do not think about falling asleep, because you
Such
think
good
about
advice.
that, you will never fall asleep. That's just how the anxious mind works.
Yeah.
And so,
did you hear that, moms? Don't force your child to go. I said, did you hear that, moms? Don't try to force your kid to go to sleep. Just let him imagine, keep his eyes open, tell him to keep his eyes open. And then I love what you said about the house cleaning, mamas. When you need to go to sleep, think about it as cleaning our house. We are always cleaning, but we need to clean in here. So that's super important. Sleep and cleaning.
Absolutely. And here's why it's even more important for moms, right? Because I mentioned earlier that, we have a huge influence on each other's microbiomes, right? So let me give you an example of that. There was a study that was published, I think, done out of Johns Hopkins University, where they followed individuals who were given a course of antibiotics for whatever ailment, right? Sinus issues or ear infection or whatever it may be. Prior to them starting the antibiotic, they grabbed the individual, they took a bunch of microbiome samples, and they did an analysis of what their microbiome looks like. And then when they started the course of antibiotics, the average course was 7 to 10 days. They measured their microbiome throughout the course of the antibiotic, and then they measured it every month for the next 6 months after they stopped the antibiotic. What they found is that clearly during the course of the antibiotic, the microbiome got all screwed up, right? Now, they found that same screwed up microbiome was present upwards of 6 months after stopping the antibiotic, right? But here's the crazy profound thing about this study, because there's been other studies that have shown the same thing. But what was different about this study is they also followed the microbiomes of people that lived with the individual in the same household that did not take the antibiotics, and they found that they had the same disruption in their microbiome as well, right? Mind-boggling.
That is mind-blowing.
Totally. Because when we all live in the same household, we have this microbiome cloud, if you will, that exists in that ecosystem, right? We're putting out bacteria from our system all the time. in many different ways. I mean, you think about dust. All of the one, if you don't dust for a day, you get a decent layer of dust in your system. What is dust? 90% of the solid matter of dust is human cells, right? So human skin cells and other cells.
Totally.
And for every one human cell, you've got 30 microbes on that cell. So all the dust you can see in the house, 30 times that are the microbes that you've just expelled out of your system. Another simple way of understanding: when you go to the bathroom and you poop, and you've got a nice poop in the toilet, and you flush the toilet, it spins it around, right? When it spins it around, it aerosolizes your fecal bacteria. Totally.
That's why public bathrooms right now.
Exactly. It's scary, right? Because it aerosolizes it, then what is your central air systems have? They have air intake, right? So they suck in the air in the room, and then, goes through the whole system, and it spits it back out everywhere else in the house, right? So we have flying poop everywhere in the house. Microscopic
Close
flying
that lid.
Exactly. But the significance of this for moms especially is that you put so much into ensuring your kids are healthy. But if you aren't allowing yourself to be equally healthy, your unhealthiness is going to negatively impact them anyway. So all of the work that you've done to make sure they sleep enough, that they getting enough activity, that they're eating well, all of that gets undone when you don't do those things for yourself, because your microbiome will influence their microbiome in a negative way.
I just got chills.
Yeah, it's a community, right? We are a community. If you live with a roommate, if you're not a mom or dad and you're living with some roommates, if your roommate is somebody that's just eating fast food all day long, not taking care of him or herself, and you're trying to be healthy, that roommate is going to have a huge impact on your health. Right. So and you're not intimate with them. The study did not just test intimate partners. So we're not talking about just coital exchanging of microbes. We're talking about platonic people as well. Right. So
workplaces. I'm thinking of the newsrooms I used to work in and how unhealthy those people were.
Oh my God. Yeah. One of the most unhealthy places, and anyone can identify with this who's been to one of these places, is the hospital. If you look at the nurses and the doctors and all that work there, right? When you look at the stress, when you look at the sterility of the environment, when you look at all the antibiotics and EMFs and beeping machines that they're around all day long, and then all the sick people they're around all day long, it's no surprising that the least healthy people I see when I go to a medical conference is like the nursing conference, for example. Right? People are really not healthy in those professions.
Many of them are dying from COVID.
Absolutely, because they're in a very compromised place. I mean, they're sacrificing. They're doing the work that we need them to do, and unfortunately, because of how the microbiome in your surrounding area can influence you, they are taking the brunt of a lot of that impact, right? So we have to be even kinder to them, the frontline workers, because they're really putting themselves in more compromised place than we even realize because of the impact of the microbiome. So, this was a bit of a tangent, but we were back to how do you make your microbiome healthy? Well, diversity was the first thing. So remember, increasing the diversity of your diet is one of the things I talked about. Second one is adding in some fasting. Simple thing, doesn't cost anything. You could definitely add in some fasting. Number 3 is to try to increase more fibrous, resistant starch type of foods. Lots of really important bacteria in your large colon require those kind of foods to proliferate, right? So they like things like sweet potato or cassava, or in Hawaii, taro, right? Taro root, for example. It has so much potency to it because a lot of the starch that's in there, you cannot digest. It feeds these important microbes in your large bowel. So those kinds of foods, you need to increase the intake of those kinds of foods, a little bit at a time. We're not talking about going and making a whole thing of, pasta or something like that out of cassava. You can just add in a sweet potato into your diet every once in a while or something like that, right? So just increase that
So like
intake.
shopping at the farmer's market where you get a variety of things and just
Absolutely.
figure it out how to work with it.
Absolutely. And again, I don't want people to feel pressure like they need to be a chef to do any of this, right? This is just simple things that you can add. Like, for example, plantains. Plantains are really high in resistant starches, and they're really good for the large microbes for the microbes in your large bowel. Plantains can be eaten directly if you don't mind that they're not super sweet and tender. But
Mm.
one of the very easy things you can do with plantains is just lightly saute them. A sautéed
Mm-hmm.
plantain is delicious.
It's like a banana,
Yeah,
sauteed
exactly. It doesn't,
bananas,
right. You just slice it, saute it on a pan a little bit. It tastes actually quite
bananas
good. And it's a very
Foster.
easy thing. Exactly.
Or actually make it savory. It is
Yep,
better.
you
I have
could.
another brand, an Instagram brand called Chew on This Flavorful Wisdom.
Hmm.
And I am going to take what you're saying here and do more of that because I'm into food adventures, doing things that are from scratch
Hmm.
and without a recipe. And
Yeah, that's
so
awesome.
for what you're saying, it totally makes sense in being diverse, trying new things, and not being afraid,
Yeah,
really.
not being
So,
afraid. So, and that's so then as we go through the list of things you can do to help your diversity, we mentioned diet, well, of course, fasting, adding more resistant starches or non-digestible carbohydrates, fiber, if you will. And then we talked about going outside more, being in different types of nature environments, the beach, the hikes in the woods, spending some time in areas like gardens and so on, like botanical gardens where there's a lot of plant diversity. All of those things help. Just having your windows and doors open at home more often
mm,
will help. Now, I know people in the West Coast right now are struggling with tremendously bad air quality, so this is
right.
not a great time to have all your windows open. But imagine once that's passed, try to get your windows and doors open more because there are microbes flying in from the birds and the squirrels and all that are nearby. They
Mm.
will fly in and increase the diversity
So
of
really
the
don't use
microbes.
air conditioning if you don't have
Yeah, if you don't have to have it, it's better not to have. We try during the day on nice days here in Chicago to just have all the windows open as much as we can, and then at night we close them to cool the house down a little bit.
We're such a
Um,
sanitized society. We're
Absolutely. So then that's
like,
the next tip, right? The next tip is increasing your diversity is stop sanitizing your home. We do not need to sterilize our home, our surfaces. Sure, if you want to sterilize the toilet, go ahead and do it. If you want to sterilize like the shower part of it, fine. But most surfaces in your home do not need to be cleaned with Clorox and chlorine and all that, right? That anything that says kills 99.99% of germs is not what you need in
mm,
order to keep your house clean. And there are studies show that there's a big difference in the outcome of kids' health in houses that use chlorine-based cleaners versus
mm,
ones that don't,
mm.
right? So we don't need it. Like what I do, for example, we use a cloth and water and then a couple of drops of essential oil for some smell, and that's how we clean most of the surfaces in the house.
Not
Now, if
even
we
vinegar or anything like that. Or
not even vinegar or anything, nothing that really affords any major killing. Now, if I brought home a raw chicken and we're cutting it on the counter and there's some chicken juice, we're going to Clorox that because you don't want salmonella on there, right? If you had raw beef on the counter or something like that and you've got some of that beef juice, you want to Clorox that to make sure you're not contaminating your kitchen.
mm,
But for the most part, most surfaces in our house are not cleaned with antimicrobials. We
mhm.
need to build a little bit of a microbial ecosystem in your home. And that becomes really important to your overall health and your microbiome as it is with your kids' health as well. So that all of those things lead to an increase in diversity, and they are simplified things. Other things you can do, which I'm sure, for example, you do and you talk about in your show, is cleaning up your personal care products,
Mm.
using more natural versions of soaps and deodorants and hair products and creams and lotions and all that makes a huge difference, right? It's so hard to overstate the importance of those things because everything you put in and on yourself will have an impact on your ecosystem. And when your
Mhm.
ecosystem is impacted negatively, it will have an impact on your health and wellness, right? So just think about a house plant, right? What of your personal care products would you not pour into the soil of the houseplant, right? Like let's say you like plants and you've got this beautiful plant there. Would you take the lotion you currently use and pour it in there? Or do you feel like that might kill the plant, right?
Wow, what an interesting way to look at that. That's
Yeah, and if you feel like it's gonna kill the plant, then you probably shouldn't use it on yourself because
yeah.
we're essentially made up of same things, right? Us and the
As
plant.
moms, we don't think about our personal care products as
Mhm.
something that is affecting our health. We normally will take whatever we think will make us beautiful or smell good.
Mhm.
And there was a Dateline episode, which is my ex-boyfriend. He did an episode where there were two different families, and they looked chemically at what they ingested. And the moms of the healthy family forgot about the healthcare products. I mean, the personal body products. They
Yep.
had parabens, they had all these different things. So I
Yeah.
think that's one of the things that we could switch over as moms and realize that now that you're saying this, we're actually taking care of our families'
Hmm.
microbiome by doing this. Is that right? By taking
Absolutely.
care,
Yeah.
changing up.
Yeah, and when you take care of the microbiome, you're taking care of your immune system and all other functions within the body, right? So think about it this way. If you're spending extra money and extra effort to eat organic and clean food and you're making all those difficult dietary choices, but then at the same time you're using makeup and lotions and all this stuff, concealers and all that tend to have a lot of chemicals in it, parabens, like you said, all kinds of antimicrobials and chemicals that have not been tested on the human microbiome, then you're taking one step forward but two steps back, right? So it has to be a comprehensive approach. But the thing is, I don't want it to seem overwhelming to people, right? Every little bit will help, right?
Okay.
We're not saying tomorrow you need to revamp your entire lifestyle, right? So just keep in mind that you want to keep adding on new changes as you go along. You don't have to reorder your entire life the next day. Like I just started with like, okay, from now on, I'm going to find the cleanest and most healthy version of deodorant that I can find. And then
Mm-hmm.
it took me a while to find a clean, healthy, aluminum-free type of deodorant, paraben-free, and so on, that actually worked for me, and it took a few months, but I've had a clean deodorant for the last year or more that I've enjoyed. And so, the same thing with the lotion. We found a lotion that we really like that works for everybody's skin that's clean. It took a while, right? So again, it's not something that you need to feel pressure on, feel anxious about, feel bad about that you're not doing. Just start making those baby steps, right? So improve the diet incrementally, improve how you're cleaning your household incrementally, and improve what you're putting on and in you incrementally. Every one of those changes will make a difference. And cumulatively, they'll make a huge difference.
One thing that's a little complex is now that we are in this COVID time, the sanitization that we're told we need to be, the hand sanitizers, the alcohol, the surfaces that we're supposed to clean. What do you have advice for us about that?
So when this first started, because we didn't have as much information on it, even for me, I was cleaning everything, right? Anything that comes into my house, I was going to clean. Even things like groceries, even packages, Amazon packages, we're cleaning everything because we didn't really understand how this is transmitted, where the big risks are, right? Now we know that through fomites, which are contact surfaces, the transmission risk is really low. So we don't clean anything anymore that comes into the house. The only time I use a hand sanitizer if I'm out in public and I'm touching things that have been touched a lot that day, like door handles or gas pump, pushing buttons on elevators, things like that, things that have been touched a lot. I sanitize afterwards, just because I'm not as conscious of not touching my eyes and nose and all that. So as a level of protection, I just sanitize my hands. Now, that's not great to have to do that 4 or 5 times a day as you're out, but it's also not devastating to your system.
Okay.
It's okay. Now, when we go to restaurants, we go out and eat outdoor only. We don't eat indoors. Outdoor only when we go out to eat. When we first were thinking about it, we were thinking, okay, every time they bring a utensil, like a spoon or a fork, a knife, you're going to have to clean all of that. Well, no, because there's very little risk of transmission through those kind of things, and they're not being touched by hundreds of people, right? So the fork is basically washed in a dishwasher in the back of the restaurant. One person takes it and wraps it up in the napkin or whatever, and then eventually you get it, right? So that the risk of transmission is very low. It's not worth cleaning that thing with alcohol and all that. So we leave that, right? So again, it's risk mitigation, right? So you're doing things, you're not trying to live in a bubble. You're just trying to mitigate the high risk type of scenarios. So yes, the sanitizing and all that can have a dysfunction in your ecosystem, but you don't have to do it to the extent that we've been doing it. Earlier, when this first started, like I said, every time we'd bring something into the house, if I brought an Amazon package and I set it on the counter, I'm going to clean what's inside the Amazon package, and then I'm going to clean the counter afterwards too, right? Which means lots of sterilizing is happening. We stopped doing that after May, because as you start to understand and see the science and read the papers, we know better, we have more knowledge, then we know, well, there's really no risk with that, right? I would rather let that microbiome flourish on my counter than sanitize it because of a minuscule risk of COVID being there. Right? So that's where we are with it.
And I think rely on sunlight too, I think.
Totally, yeah. Sunlight helps a lot. But like with kids, my kids go play at the park. If the park is really crowded, meaning it's really hard for them to not be in a mess of like 25, 30 kids, we probably will stay away. But if we go to the park and there's 5, 6 other kids there, they play, right? And then as soon as they're done playing, we try to clean their hands, because the first thing they're going to do is stick their fingers up their nose and all that, right? So again, that's a mitigated risk, because that park has been under the sun. The UV rays have been killing off the virus. The likelihood of a kid being a super spreader and spreading the virus all over that equipment is really low. So, adults aren't playing on there, right? Adults are the main spreaders of this. And so just calculating all of those risks, we go, okay, it's totally worth it for their mentality, for their physical needs to be out there playing, climbing the jungle gyms and all that. And then, coming back, and right before they have a chance to pick their nose and stick their fingers in their mouth like they like to do, we just clean their hands just to be cautious. And then we move on, right?
That makes so much sense. And what a relief. Lay out that scenario. It's okay, moms. Let them play at the park.
Totally. Outdoors, we do almost everything that we would normally do outdoors, right? With some degree of social distancing. For example, we go for walks all the time. Yesterday, we spent almost the entire day outdoors. There was one area in the big park area that we went to that was actually quite crowded, meaning there was, if we were in one area, it was hard to be distanced from people. We were within 4 or 5 feet of other groups of people. So when we come into that kind of close proximity, we put on our masks, right? Because you can accumulate viral shedding in that small area. The risk is still minimal because you're outside, but nonetheless, it poses a risk. Then the moment it's a little bit more opened up and we have kind of our own area on the big lawn, then there's no mask and the kids are running around and all that. I ride my bike all the time. I love bike riding as part of an important part of my exercise. If I'm on my path riding my bike, there's lots of people jogging by, riding by. I'm not wearing a mask during that, right? Those kind of fleeting engagement with people or interactions, where it's like you're passing them by in a split second and all that, the risk of transmitting virus to someone else is really low. And then, of course, things are still going in through your eyes and ears and all that. So you're still getting exposure. You're getting your vitamin D from being out there in the sun. So you're getting positive exposure still, with minimizing your risk of getting enough COVID exposure to make you sick, right? So at a restaurant, for example, we go out to eat. Now we started doing that as of like end of April or May. No, sorry, not end of April. It was end of May,
Oh,
early June,
May.
when
Okay.
we went to the first ones. But we only eat outdoors, right?
Mhm.
Because the fact of the matter is the virus is spread through aerosols and is spread through respiratory droplets. And the studies clearly show that in an indoor environment without proper outside air circulation, when somebody coughs or spews and the virus comes out, it can actually hang in the air for hours. And for someone else to walk through that cloud later on and get enough exposure. But in an outdoor environment, the virus actually gets knocked down to the ground pretty quickly, right?
Mhm.
So sitting outdoors, even as close as 6 feet to other tables, is still much lower risk than being indoors, being 10 feet away, right?
Mhm.
So now when we need to go indoor into the restaurant to go to the bathroom, we put the mask on and we go in. And then we come back out and we eat. We're hanging out like normal. The big difference now with Chicago, they added in a new regulation where, of course, all the wait staff have always been masked since the restaurant's open. But now what they have it is when the waiter is coming up and you're going to engage with him or her, you have to put your mask on too.
Mm.
And that kind of protects them to a certain degree as
Right.
well, right? So again, it's not a big deal. It's like, okay, we have the mask here, and then the waiter actually comes and stands a few feet away, like acknowledging like they're going to come and ask you questions. You put it on and you engage with them, and then you take it off when the food comes to eat.
Mhm. It's
So
not
we
that
do
hard.
that. It's not hard. We go and eat, but we don't sterilize the table and all the salt shakers and all that stuff. We don't do that anymore.
Okay.
We've gone on a couple of trips. We've had to cancel lots of vacation. We typically love to travel as a family. I, of course, travel a lot for work, but we ended up canceling trips. But the types of vacations we were good with was actually, renting a house, for example, rather than staying in a hotel. Because
Mhm.
when you stay in a hotel, you're in a relatively confined space with lots of other people, right? Even though
Right.
you're in your own room, you're sharing kind of the same central air system, which poses a bit of a risk. And in the hallways and in the elevators and all that, it's a little bit more of a risk. So we want to just take that risk out of mind. And then we rented a house in Florida, for example, on the beach, and spent some time in the house. It was, 10 days, and it was wonderful. It was a great escape.
Mhm.
And we're renting a house in Palm Springs in November. We're renting a house again in Florida in December, and it's perfectly fine. The risk is very low. You're in your own place, without other people coming in there and possibly contributing to viral loads in the environment there. So
That just brings
um,
up airplanes.
yeah, so airplanes are a difficult thing. Airplanes definitely pose a risk. Now, the good thing about airplanes is that their cleaning procedures have really heightened, right? So
Mm.
the surfaces are cleaned well. Another good thing about an airplane is the air filtration systems are better than most indoor spaces, right?
Mhm.
They
Like a
use really
HEPA.
high grade, really high grade HEPA filters. The system sucks in the cabin air quite aggressively, filters it through before blowing it back out. So the filtration systems are good. The other good part about it is also masks are mandated, right?
Mm.
So
Mhm.
everybody in there is wearing a mask. So you're dramatically reducing the amount of aerosols that are coming out and accumulating in that environment. So if you have to fly, it's not the end of the world.
Mm.
It's not that, oh my God, I'm definitely going to get COVID. I know lots of people who fly. My mom is a medical doctor, and she runs an ICU in St. Louis, and she lives in Chicago. So she's been flying every week since the pandemic started, right? So she's been probably on 50 flights in the last 8 months, and it's never been a problem.
Mm.
ICUs are the same thing. It's safe right now. Like doctors are not really getting COVID in hospitals because everyone is masked up and they're
Mm.
taking all the precautions. So for the most part, the big spreads right now are coming through, places where people congregate indoors, and virus can accumulate in the air. So gyms, bars, and then indoor restaurants, and then even unfortunately indoor places of worship, right?
Mm.
Those
Mhm.
can be detrimental too, because if you've got 100 people in an indoor space and everyone's singing and talking and all that, you're going to spew out a lot of virus into that area. If
Mhm.
it can be done outdoors, that's much, much better, much lower risk. So, the bars, the indoor restaurants, the gyms, if you can avoid those things, those are called super spreader events, then your risk for getting it is much lower. And you have still some small risk of getting exposure, which is good, because one of the things I want personally is to get exposure to COVID
Mm.
without getting enough exposure that makes you sick,
Hmm.
right? So it almost
Hmm.
acts like a natural
Hmm.
vaccine, if you will, right? If you get
Hmm.
fleeting exposure, like for example, somebody walks by you outdoors and they're within 6 feet and they sneeze, and they have active COVID, you're going to get some of their viral load. A lot of it will get dampened down by the outside air and the humidity and so on, but you might pick up some viral load, but it's just enough that it triggers your immune response, but it's not enough virus to actually make you sick,
Wow,
right?
we can really be less afraid to walk around now.
Yes, I mean, I actually, the moment it started getting warm enough in the late spring in Chicago to be able to go outside, we were dying to get outside and walk around, because part of what I wanted was some sort of fleeting exposure to this thing,
Mm.
because you might, there's a good chance you'll come in contact with it at some point,
Right.
but if you're being careful, more than likely you will not contact it in such a level that it'll actually make you sick. So you
Mm.
need about 1,000 viral particles to enter your system in order for you to actually get sick.
Mm.
Anything less than that may be just enough to trigger an immune response, but not actually make you sick. So it
Mm.
kind of acts as like a training for your immune system to deal with it, right? So,
Opening schools might be a good thing. It's a
it
whole
could
nother
be.
topic, but
Yeah, it could be. It really depends on how they handle it. In our area right now, the schools are closed. They're all virtual. So what we've done is we've created a school pod at home.
Mhm.
We've,
Mhm.
we hired a teaching assistant to come in and help run through the computer program. We're not using the program that the school affords. We got a different one that works much better, and it's easier for the kids to navigate through. And then we've got the kids each have a couple classmates that are also coming in our little pod, and that gives them a little bit of a classroom setting. We actually bought a bunch of school desks for the basement and converted the basement into what looks like a
Awesome.
classroom. Yeah, to give them a little sense of that. And then they're getting some exposure to other kids as well,
Right.
both of course mentally from playing, and then immunologically from from an immune system standpoint. And then they spend as much time as as the lessons allow outdoors too during the day, playing
Mhm.
in the backyard, front yard. Every Friday is field trip day, where you go somewhere outdoors. Like last weekend they went apple picking and they went to the zoo and places like that. So
That's
trying to gain some outdoor exposure, hanging out and playing with other kids. And you navigate and you adjust and you adapt, and you take those, you minimize your risk. There's always going to be some risk, but you can absolutely mitigate it, right? So
Mm.
just like that first analogy we talked about when we were like car driving, right? There's an inherent risk with getting in your car and driving on the road, but you mitigate your risk for a serious event by doing things like putting on your seatbelt, making sure your car is in working order, using your turn signals, following the rules of the road, driving to the speed limit, right? Not driving inebriated. All of these simple things, each one mitigates your risk more and more and more, so that you can get from A to B much more safely, than someone that's not following all of those mitigating steps. So you don't have to be afraid, because number one, you can minimize your risk of getting massive levels of exposure that can actually make you sick. Number two, if you have a healthy microbiome, like we talked about, the doing all of those things to improve diversity. And then one more thing is to reduce that leaky gut. The vast majority of people that are probably listening have pretty severe leaky gut. We
Mm.
find that in our studies, in our published clinical trials, 55% of healthy young individuals who have no chronic illness, no
Mm.
medical issues, have severe leaky gut, right? So
Wow.
yeah, the estimate in adults, if you include adults in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, is over 75% have severe leaky gut, right? So that becomes the biggest source of chronic inflammation. Now, as you increase the diversity in your microbiome, that'll start helping the leaky gut. Another thing you can do is what we work with all the time is the spore-based probiotics. We actually have published studies showing that it supports a healthier gut lining, and it stops that leakiness in the gut in as little as 30 days. Right? So that becomes an important factor in kind of stopping that source of chronic low-grade inflammation. And then on top of that, you take your micronutrients to help the nuts and bolts of your immune system. So I take, for example, about 2,000 milligrams of vitamin C a day, right? That's my normal everyday intake. I take somewhere around, 5 to 6,000 IUs of vitamin D3. I take somewhere around 300 micrograms of vitamin K2. I take some B complex so that you get some B vitamins. There's studies, at least one study now on COVID and B vitamin levels in your body, right? So that has an impact. I take zinc, somewhere around, I think 40, 50 milligrams of zinc per day. I take beta carotene, just a small amount, it's like 1,000 IUs a day that helps with respiratory health. And then, of course, I use all of the probiotics and prebiotics we have to maintain healthy gut health. So probiotics, the spore-based probiotics play a huge role in training and stimulating your immune response all the time. We've got studies on that. And then prebiotics play a really important role in supporting the growth of all of those really important bacteria and the production of the fuel source for your immune system as well, right? So we keep up with those things. So basic supplements, trying to be a healthy diet as much as possible. We'll talk about what the tolerance ranges are for all of that healthy behavior. I try to stay active as much as I can. When it's nice out, I go out for bike rides and runs and things like that. And then we try to do things as normal as possible as a family. We have a relatively small circle of people that we engage with like normal, that we don't do the social distancing and all that, which is like family, for example, right? My sister and her kid and her husband, my mom, my brother, my wife's family, like her brother and his family. That's kind of our expanded pod of people that we get together with, spend time with in our homes like normal, But we have other people that we're friends with, but we haven't seen in a while, that we do more social distance, like hanging out, right? You go outdoors, you meet outdoors, just because they are exposed to a lot of people, we're exposed to people. We don't want to bring that exposure together because it multiplies it all, right? So we've expanded our circles of people that we spend time with. I do that with some of my coworkers as well. My business partner lives here in Chicago. Some of our team members that live here in Chicago, we spend more normal time together face to face. I'm familiar with what they do. None of them are high risk people. They're not going out to bars and gyms and all that. So the risk is mitigated again. It's not eliminated. You can never eliminate risk completely unless you literally wrap yourself in saran wrap and sit in one spot.
We don't want to do that.
You don't want to do that. That's
not
not living. Exactly. And so it's mitigated, and you need to take the risk. The other analogy I give is like with the HIV epidemic, right? There's a lot of synergies here. Because when the HIV epidemic first started, there was a lot of confusion on how it's transmitted, right? And who was the risk group. And for a period of time, people were very scared of coming in contact with one another, right? The thought was if you hug somebody with HIV, you could get it, or if you shook hands, or you could get it from a toilet seat, right? All of these things were going through people's minds. Then when we start to understand how the virus infects, how it's transmitted, where the risks are, it became very easy not to ever get HIV, right? I think everybody listening knows exactly how not to get it. Right. It knows exactly what they can do to dramatically increases their risk for getting it. Right. So it's the same thing. Similar. It's exactly similar, right? It's a virus that's here. It's within certain populations, even expanding, right? Early on in this pandemic, we weren't sure how it's transmitted, who was most at risk, all of that stuff. that is all becoming really clear now.
Mm.
And then we also now know what we can do within ourselves to make ourselves much more resilient should we ever come in contact with it, right? Your immune system is perfectly well equipped to handle this virus. If your immune system is functioning even 80% of normal, it will just eradicate this virus the moment it sees it, right? Our immune system is phenomenal. It's powerful. It provides long-term immunity. Now we know that something called memory T cells. So even though we're not necessarily producing antibodies to it, if you ever come across it, you develop these memory T cells that can last years and
Cool.
provide you protection, right? Which is awesome. We know that if your microbiome is healthy, you're taking the right supplements and precautions, you're staying relatively active, you're bringing down that chronic low-grade inflammation, and you're not in the higher risk group, then your immune system should be able to handle this perfectly fine. You don't have to live in fear. You just have to live in a state of reduced mitigated risk, right? That's all it is. It's no different than putting on your seatbelt when you go in the car. You don't have to drive 100 miles an hour with your seatbelt off, right? You can still get to your destination just fine with your seatbelt on, driving the speed limit. You'll still get there, and so that's the difference where we have to go mentally.
Yeah. Wow. I feel so much more equipped with this information. And just thinking about all that you said, it seems that if we go back to what Mother Nature has given us, there is all of that Mother Nature wisdom, to be outdoors, to do the things that we used to do, not be such an indoor, clean phobic society, which we think of as modern. We think of as, the modern technology and the modern way, but actually there's so much wisdom in nature that just reverting to some of those, that doesn't have to be going back to the covered wagon days, but just sensible outdoor nature. It seems like all those things you talked about, diet, being outside, taking in different areas of the world or even our island to get those spores and bacteria that are natural. Those sound like beautiful things to do. I mean, it's, it's not like it's hard.
No.
And it's actually enjoyable. So
right. You're not making any sacrifices to do those things, right?
It's a shift of doing some fun things with your family, actually.
Yep. Yeah. And don't underestimate the power of those things in terms of building your resilience, right? In terms of protecting yourself and your family. Like every time you go out for a bike ride together as your family, or a walk, or you go for a hike if you have, trails and woods around you, all of those things compound to protecting your family. That's the part I want people to understand, is that, of course, everyone can see how that's good for your psyche and good for the relationship among the people within the family. But at the cellular level, that's really good for your immune system and for your microbiome and all of that, right? So so don't underestimate it. And then the mindfulness work that we have to do, right? So one of the things that's so stressful about this time is, obviously, on top of the COVID, we've got political things, social things, we've got elections coming up and all of that stuff. And it really riles people up, right? I have basically stopped looking at most of those things on social media and all that, because there's no point to it. Right? It doesn't help any of us, and again, social media is really good at filtering out things that you don't frequently look at. So you can select what you want to show up on your news feed by clicking on the things that are much better for your psyche than somebody sends you some meme that really angers you because it's got some crazy political thing on it, and you click on it, then the Facebook algorithm is going to go, oh, this is what they want to see all the time. So we're going to send you more of this kind of crap, right?
They watch the show instead.
Exactly.
Things that feed you, nurture you, help you, are encouraging.
Totally. Most of what I do on social media right now is try to share. I try to share research information that I think will help and empower people. I try not to really look at the feed and all that much outside of friends and their personal things that are going on in their lives, just keeping in touch with people, right? So I don't click on news things. I don't click on what look like articles. They're probably some form of, of augmented news and so on. It's just, there's just so much nonsense out there, right? And I don't follow the major news medias, on any spectrum, because they all have an agenda. They're trying to sell a product, right? And so if I'm going to try to keep up with news, I'm looking at things like the BBC. I'm looking at things that are news sources from outside of our country, looking in and giving a little bit more of an objective view on what's going on, rather than the highly subjective views you get from our main media sources. So trying to do that. And then really we need to divorce ourselves from that whole, non-ending fire hose funnel of crazy nonsense information from all these social media, sources. Programs like this are the ideal thing you can do, right? Because, you're doing your job to vet the guests that you have on, right? You're doing your job to vet and make sure these are people that, have some credibility in what they're saying. You do history checks, you look at where they've been and what their education is, all of that stuff. So you're giving a little bit more of a better curated funnel of information. And, I would rather people spend time listening to your program and the people that you've interviewed than like just scrolling through crazy memes and all that on Facebook and Instagram, which
that's
is
the whole reason, that I created the show, was because I knew that I was doing that, and I knew other moms that were doing that. And I said, I need to make something, instead of that, somewhere people can go. And that was really one of the reasons that I did this. And
and it's what's great about it is, when you and I talked before the interview started and so on, you didn't like try to pigeonhole what the conversation would be, right? You're not trying to direct the answers that are coming out. You, in fact, are very open, and you say, are you comfortable talking about this, this, and this? And, someone like me, I'm comfortable talking about virtually anything. And so, we don't know where the conversation is going to go, right? But ultimately, you've kind of figured out a way to do a little bit of screening, so that the people you have coming on are providing something of use, with a little bit of credibility. So that's just why I'm always really eager and excited to get on programs like this, because it's so important in sharing like pretty good concrete information, and not everything I've said is the ideal approach for everybody, right? It's to provide them with information that's based on science, based on research. I'm a microbiologist. I do science for a living, but it gives them a little bit of empowerment, a little bit of understanding of how things work in their system, so that they can make choices of their own, and that's really where the rubber hits the road in terms of making improvements in your life. Is you have to have informed decisions. And what decision you end up going with is it really based on your entire life, what's going on around your world, but you need the right information. And there's just so much nonsense out there.
That's what this show is about. It is, I am curating information for people so that they can better their lives. They can make informed decisions. And I'm not telling anybody what they need to do, but just presenting it so that they can say, that makes sense to me. I'll take that and that and that, and then create their world for their family that feels good to them and safe for them. Yeah. So this is just so awesome. I'm wondering if you would want to do a lightning round, just so we get a little personal insight into your health practices, because we know that you know everything that you've seen in the science world. So I think it'd be fun. So I have a few questions here, and we can just go through them really quick. Okay, so what's your favorite healthy breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
Okay, so I most of the time I don't eat breakfast. So my favorite healthy breakfast is skipping breakfast, but I love breakfast food. Right. So if I was to eat breakfast, like if we go on vacation, one of the things my wife and kids love is breakfast. And so if we were to eat breakfast, I would be eating something like French toast, which is not great for you. But I'm like, if I'm going to eat breakfast, I'm going to eat breakfast, you know? So fortunately, that doesn't happen very often. But if I'm going to sit down and eat breakfast, it's going to be
Might
French
as
toast.
well.
Yeah, being from India and being of Asian descent, for me, lunch and dinner and probably even breakfast is any kind of Asian food is just I'm always craving it. You know, Chinese, Thai, Vietnamese, Indian. You know, curries. I need a lot of flavor on my palate,
Mm,
and so
mm.
I'm always craving some form of Asian food. Now, guilty pleasure food that I crave and I try to have it once, you know, maybe once every like 8, 10 days is like a nice big burger and some fries.
Ooh.
You know, a burger and fries, like, you know, every like 8 to 10 days, I just start craving a big fat burger. And oftentimes, you know, if I go out and have like a really good workout or something like that, then I'll reward myself with a little bit of a big burger. So I don't eat perfect by any means at all. I try to follow the 80-20 rule.
Mm.
If 80% of the time I'm making pretty good decisions, then the 20% of the time that I don't can be made up for. You know,
Mhm.
and that's how it is in to me in reality in terms of how your body works as well. You don't have to be perfect by any means. You have to be mostly good, and the outcomes will be okay.
Yeah, that makes me feel a lot better.
Mhm.
Okay, so the next one is, what's your favorite place to buy groceries?
So we've been buying groceries at, we do Whole Foods. That's one of the ones that's nearby us. We are very fortunate in that we have like three different ethnic markets around us as
Mm.
well. So we've got a massive Indian grocery store that has really awesome organic fruits and vegetables that come from different areas that we don't typically see in Whole Foods. And then we have something called the H Mart. H Mart is a massive Korean Asian market. You know, it's as big as like a Target. It's huge, and so you get amazingly diverse options there as well. So those two, I would say, the Indian grocery store and then H Mart are my two favorite places to go for groceries.
Okay. What and when is your favorite type of exercise and why?
Yeah. So I'm an avid cyclist. In fact, up till about 3 years ago, I was pretty competitive cyclist as well. So I
Mm.
raced on a cycling team. You know, I would do 150, 200-mile races. You know, in the mountains. I raced in Europe. I've done a lot of really arduous cycling tasks. And the thing I like about cycling is even when you're racing as a team, it's still a very individual sport in your mind, right? It's 100% up to you,
Mhm.
and you suffer through a lot in cycling. I mean, imagine a 6-hour race on the bike. You know, the first hour you're all excited and getting and going. 3, 4 hours into it, you feel like you're gonna die, you know, and your body's gonna give out, and then it becomes a real big mental battle, right? And
Mhm.
I love that. I love that
Mhm.
being on the bike, outdoors, on the road, so close to the ground, just suffering. I love that
Mm.
suffering.
And pushing
Um,
through,
that
pushing
pushing
through.
through it, that perseverance through it. You know, we call it in cycling, we call it pole to pole, right? When you get to
Oh.
the point where you're pole to pole, the idea is that you know, when you're riding and let's say you're in a race and the pace is really fast and you're struggling to keep up, and you think to yourself, I can keep up this pace or just from here to that next pole.
Mm.
Right? I can do it. That's just a few seconds. I can do it. You get to that next pole, you go, okay, one more pole. I can do it. Right? So it's incremental wins along the way. And before you know it, you've covered 60 miles just thinking pole to pole. And life works in many ways that way too. You know, looking at a company, you know, we've built a company from 0 employees now to almost 90 employees in 6 years, right? So we've really scaled very quickly. And when you think about it 6 years ago to get to where we are now as a company, it's a huge daunting task, right? Like, how would you ever get there? But it's one simple step at a time. It's pole to pole. Every little incremental step adds up to benefit. And that's kind of how I try to look at everything in life as well, right? So whether it's stuff around my personal life, or it's business, or it's health, it's every little incremental step makes a difference.
I love that so much. And I in the last show, I was talking about how encapsulating where we are now in this pandemic really helps, as far as we were in a phase of hopeful that something would stop this. And now we're in this endurance phase, is what I talked about.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's a pull to pull,
Yep.
because we can encapsulate, okay, we know we need to run this marathon, condition, train for it, get ourselves ready to go through that whole arc and the finish line, and instead of that place of uncertainty,
Mm-hmm.
where we just don't know when the end is, which is
Right.
a different feeling. So we can
Totally.
go pull to pull with this, guys. We
Mm-hmm.
can go from, here we are, we're enduring this, and we're going to do this. So we need to take care of our microbiome and take care of our wellness, our sleep, all these things, being pull to pull, knowing that we're going to get through it. And I know that when I thought of that idea, it just made me feel like, okay, I can do this,
Yeah.
rather than, I don't know,
Yeah.
with uncertainty.
Absolutely. And I just saw an article today that actually kind of pissed me off a little bit. Like, the headline of the article was "Twindemic," right? What's going to happen in the fall when the flu comes on and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, who cares? Like, I don't want people sitting here worrying about what is going to happen in the fall when flu increases and all that stuff. Let's worry about what we're going to do tomorrow. Let's worry
Yes.
about what we're going to do the next day. Like, what does your week look like?
Mm-hmm.
Let's go pole to pole, day to day,
Mm-hmm.
week to week. And reading
Mm-hmm.
those kind of articles, and I know that gets attention and it gets eyeballs on the paper, and then people see the ads and all that stuff, but it just makes me mad, because it doesn't help people.
Right.
It just creates more angst and anxiety. It makes people think about the things that are uncontrollable and unknown, that are so far away, right? What
Totally.
is controllable is, what are you doing today with your day, right? What are you
Mm-hmm.
doing for your lunch? What are you doing after your lunch? What are you doing to get active a little bit today? Are you getting outside today? Those are the things you can control within your day.
Mm-hmm.
Focus on that. So I didn't even read that article. I just saw the headline. It
Oh
pissed me off
boy.
that they would even write that, and I just moved on from it, right? Because I'm like, people don't need to be thinking
We
about
don't.
those things right
No,
now.
as Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, says, hashtag control the controllables. That's
Mhm.
his thing. And I love it.
Totally.
I feel like this is a mindset of success, the pole to
Yep.
pole and control the controllables.
That's exactly
That's
what
what
I
we
do
need to
too.
be in,
Yeah.
this mindset.
Yeah, all the variables that I have within my control, I try to bring them under control, and everything else you just kind of have to let go, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to believe that the more right steps you're taking, the more you will get to the destination you want to, right? You may have to zig and zag based on other things outside of your control, but you're going to be moving in the right direction. That's really the
Mm-hmm.
key, right? So pole to pole, step one after the
Love
other.
it. I love it, love it, love it. Okay. How many hours of sleep do you personally need, and what do you actually get?
So for my needs, there's two factors to my needs. One is, how much sleep do I need to function optimally, meaning my mind and my brain and all that. One of the benefits that I have biologically is I work really well with on adrenaline, right? So when I'm flying around, I've been in scenarios last year, for example, that I've been in 7 different countries in 7 different time zones in 1 week, right? And we're talking not anywhere close to each other. We're talking in California. I was in California. Then right away, I went to Hong Kong, then India, then New Zealand, and then back to New York, right?
Whoa.
All of those 5 places in one 7-day period. Obviously, most of my sleep is on airplanes and all that. But in each of those stops, I'm having meetings, doing high-end presentations to scientists and doctors and all that. So I have to function.
Mhm.
Fortunately for me, I work really well on adrenaline. I get that probably from my mom. That's a biological thing. My mom is 70 years old. She works a night shift in the ICU, right? She works a 14-hour night shift, but she works on adrenaline. Not a lot of 70-year-olds are running ICUs overnight, right? And so, but she works phenomenally well on adrenaline. So my mind is sharp and I can function. So I can get by with a little bit of sleep. Now, what my body actually needs for me to feel fully rested is around 8.5 hours. Somewhere, I'd say between 7 and 8.5 hours. Most of the time, when I'm home, I do get about 7 hours of sleep. And I wake up feeling like I wish I could sleep another hour, but I don't. I get up and I'm perfectly rested. Actually, I've never been a morning person. And then here's one more thing: if I let myself sleep, I can sleep as long as 15, 16 hours.
Oh.
Yeah, so still, which is great. That's the thing I get from my dad's side of the family. His side of the family will go into these hibernations where they would just sleep forever.
Making up for sleep debt, maybe?
Probably, yeah, accumulating it, right? To some degree. Now, like I remember when I was younger, my dad's younger brother would come to see us for the weekend, and we'd be all excited because my fun uncle is coming. One of the things he would do is just sleep. He'd be sleeping for like 16 hours, 17 hours. And we're like, wake up. We want to hang out with you. I distinctly remember that.
So it's totally genetic.
Totally, yeah. For time to time, if I'm just like, okay, I have nothing tomorrow on Saturday morning, I just want to sleep till I'm done sleeping, I will sleep like 15 hours,
Wow.
And so I would say that I need to improve my sleep. I need to make myself go to bed a little bit earlier than I normally do. I typically go to bed around 1 o'clock, 1:30. I do a lot of work in that time after the kids go to bed and before I fall asleep. It's a highly focused time for me on the science, reading papers, putting together presentations and all that. But I probably should cut that down and probably try to get to bed by 12:30 on average, and then, let myself wake up around 8 or 9, and I'd probably be in better health position.
Well, it seems like you're doing pretty well. So
yeah, I'm making it through, but I do need to improve that as you get older.
As we all can, right?
Yeah, totally. Need to improve. Yeah.
Okay. So do you have a meditative or calming practice?
Yes. So for me, cycling is very calming, very meditative. When I'm there, it's just me and my voice in my head, right? And then the sounds of nature and the wind and all that, it becomes very, very meditative for me, that experience. The other thing I really, really like is massage. Throughout the early phase of the pandemic, I went, I think 16 weeks without a massage, which is really unusual for me, right? Because salons weren't open. We weren't comfortable having someone coming in the house and so on. And that is really unusual for me because I get massage once a week at least normally, right? And there's all these studies
a wellness protocol.
Absolutely. And massage is so relaxing and calming for me. There's also all these studies, if someone rubs you with the oil, it actually brings down your cortisol levels dramatically, like 35%, and increases oxytocin levels like 25%. And oxytocin is a happy bonding hormone, right? So it has huge benefits for you just physically as well. So then, sometime in early June, one of my friends who I became friends with because she's a massage therapist, and I used to be one of her clients. She started coming in and doing in-home service. So that's, that was like one of the biggest
You're like,
things.
Massage. It's like you just can't go for very long until, I feel the same way. It just does something. It does something like that, nothing else.
Yeah, self-care, that kind of self-care. And, a lot of moms and all that who are so busy out there and all that feel guilty about that kind of self-care, that kind of pleasure, if you will. I'm all about taking advantage of those kind of things because your health, your state of being is so important in terms of influencing your kids' state of being. Not only, of course, just from a relationship standpoint, but like as we described earlier, from a microbiome standpoint. you know?
That is such
Yeah.
incredible advice. Now that I know that the oxytocin level and the
Mhm.
cortisol level, those percentages, and then it affects our microbiome. Okay, everyone must get massages if that works for you, or the thing that induces those endorphins in you.
Yeah.
I think that's a key thing.
Like with my wife, it's facials. Like facials are
Mm.
super soothing and like relaxing to her. So like go get facials, like just do it. Spoil yourself, treat yourself, indulge. You got to do the things that really help make you feel happy.
It's keeping your family healthy, right?
Hmm.
Okay, so if you have a guilty pleasure, when it comes to food or whatever, what is it, and how much do you allow yourself to indulge?
Yeah, so I have a real weak spot for certain types of sweets, like cupcakes or donuts.
Cupcakes.
Like, oh my God, if there's
They're
a donut
so
box
beautiful,
somewhere
aren't
around,
they? They're just like these
oh,
little
they're so
teeny.
pretty, yeah, and they're so like, the mouth feel is so
Oh,
great. The what right, the experience that it releases in your head. Those things are like I could skip. I have no desire to eat ice cream. I have no desire to eat candy. Like there's certain things that are sweet that I have zero that do zero for me. But
mm-hmm.
if somebody makes cupcakes or somebody makes donuts or brings donuts, I cannot resist. So I would never go out myself and specifically seek out a donut or cupcake and buy it. I'm fine not doing that. But if it's there, like it's somebody's birthday and they wanted cupcakes, or it's one of the kids, like every once in a while, my daughter will be like, "Dad, can you please get me donut holes?" Like she just loves the little chocolate donut holes, and I'm like, okay, and then if I'm going to Dunkin' Donuts to get her donut holes, I'm going to pick myself up a donut as well, right? So you got to have those minor indulgences. You're not doing it every day. Maybe once every 8, 9 days or something like that, and it's just once. It's totally fine,
Mm.
absolutely fine. Mentally, it's good for you. It's an indulgement. You feel good about it. But certainly, if I ate that every day for breakfast, that would be really bad. So,
Right, right.
because a lot of people do that too, right? A lot of people stop by and get their cupcake and their donut, sorry, cupcake and their coffee as a breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a bad idea. But if you're
Mm-hmm.
eating a cupcake every once in a while and indulging in it, enjoying it, perfectly fine. Again, that
Right.
80-20 rule, right?
80/20.
If 80% of the time you're making the right decisions, you can really get away with 20% of fun.
Well, I hope if I ever see in person that you will accept cupcake making from me, because I
Oh
make
my God.
amazing cupcakes. I have this recipe from my uncle that's like, if you like carrot cake,
Yeah.
it's very light, and there's a
Mhm.
special ingredient that I can't say because it's a certain recipe that people can't detect, but they're like, something about this cupcake is so light and like voluptuous that
I
um
love it already.
so there's that,
Yeah.
and then there's the green tea chiffon cake
Oh,
cupcake that I
wow.
think you would love.
I love anything green tea too. Like the
Right.
green mochi and any sort of pastry green tea. Oh my God, yes. So next time I come to Maui, which hopefully will be soon because I'm dying to go to
We'll wear
Hawaii.
our masks.
Yes, exactly. But I'll give you a big hug too with the mask on. Again, that's a fleeting engagement in my view, especially if you have a
Oh,
mask on. The risk of
oh,
giving somebody a big hug is actually lower than shaking somebody's hand.
wow.
Because if you both have masks on and it's restricting the amount of viral particles that you're putting out, a brief engagement where your heads are, aside from one another and you're hugging each other, that to me is super low risk, especially if you're outdoors and where there's sun and there's air and all that. So I give a lot of people that I see that I know really well hugs if they're
Mhm.
comfortable with it. And then especially if you have a mask on, the risk is really minimal.
And then there's that factor of like the endorphin level of friendship. I mean, that's one thing I think a lot of us realized with this non-hugging thing is we get so much from hugs. We get
We
so
do.
much from each other. And I've been avoiding. So thank you. I feel like I can fulfill that emotional need for myself that I've been missing so much. So
Totally.
that's
Because
awesome.
your oxytocin levels jump up the moment you give somebody
Oxytocin, that's what I
drinks,
was thinking
you
of.
know? Yeah, absolutely. And I've even, obviously pre-pandemic, I was a big hugger. That's my preferred form of greeting with people. Whether I know them really well or I'm just meeting them for the first time. And,
Mm.
and then you feel something with that person, right? If they're a complete stranger on the street, I'm not going to hug them. But if somebody's introducing you to somebody that you should be connected with,
Well,
that's an
I
important
would hug you the next
agent.
time we see each other.
Well,
I feel
good.
like
That's a date.
we
Let's do it.
we have this
Cupcakes and hug.
connection. Okay, so what
Very
are
good.
things? Speaking of the things that make us feel good, what three things do you love
Mhm.
or you do to cause joy for yourself on purpose?
So let's see, going out for bike rides. That's one of the things that I absolutely love. I love binging shows. I
What's
can't
your
imagine
latest one?
what we did. So I just started watching this one just yesterday called You. It's a very bizarre kind of show. It's on Netflix, YOU. And it's about this guy who's like kind of a crazy stalker. It's a really interesting premise. It's very bizarre in many ways. It's not necessarily a feel-good show by any means, but what I love about binge watching things or watching movies, for example, is I'm really good at escaping into the plot, right?
Mm,
So I'm not thinking about anything else. I'm not thinking about work or this or that. None of the things that would normally be on your mind are on my mind. I am very much engaged in the program. And so whether I spend 3 hours or 4 hours watching that sometime in the evening, like on the weekends, I try to make sure I'm not doing any sort of work in the evenings. I want to spend a few hours watching stuff because I'm so good at sitting on the couch and escaping into
mm,
the program. And to me, that's just such a way of bringing it down. Now, my wife, on the other hand, when she watches like suspenseful things and all that, it actually makes her stressed, right? Like she tells me, she's like, "Why do you like this? It's making me so stressed." And I'm like, I don't get stressed because I'm just watching it. I'm an observer.
mhm,
And so I'm good at being a detached observer,
mm,
and it doesn't cause me stress. It actually gives me a lot of joy.
mhm,
The other thing I mentioned is massages, and I love good wine. If
mm,
you have
mm.
a really nice glass of wine, that's something that it does for your relaxation. So when I feel like I can kick up my feet, I'm about to turn on a show that I'm excited to watch, and I've got a nice glass of wine. That's like a very
Mm,
relaxing moment for me.
sounds great.
Yeah, and then
That's
another
fun.
the contrast to that is having a cup of coffee outside,
Mm,
outdoors when it's nice out. One of my favorite things when I was in Hawaii last, so I've been fortunate to be able to go every year for the last 4 or 5 years. But we were in where was I this year in January? We were in Oahu. Yeah, we were in Oahu, and in fact, we were at Waikiki because the conference I was in is somewhere in Waikiki Beach. And
mhm,
so the hotel that we got had a balcony that just looked over the ocean. And my morning escape was just in your robe, cup of coffee,
mm.
sitting on the balcony, looking at the ocean, just sipping your coffee. Oh, just amazing to me. And I do it in my backyard too. I'll go out in my backyard in my robe, on the outdoor chair that reclines a little bit, and just sit there and enjoy coffee for like 15 minutes. It's a wonderful escape for me.
Mm, I love it. I totally get you now. I
Yeah.
get the whole picture. I'm with you on it all.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I would definitely hug you because I feel like we're like the same. We
Totally. Yes.
love all the same stuff.
Yeah, we're
Love
just
it.
being humans. The biggest difference between me and most of your listeners is I happen to have a bank of knowledge on
Mhm,
how certain things work. And then
mhm,
putting it into practice is harder still, right? There's nowhere close to being perfect on that, but I have the knowledge. So when I do need to exercise the right choices and decisions, I know how to do that. And I know how to do mostly the right choices so I can have the little bit of fun and indulgence as well without it being detrimental to the system. And so my whole goal is to impart that same bank of knowledge to other people. so that they can feel secure, they can feel calm, they can feel confident in their ability to make themselves and their family healthy. And the
Mm.
beauty of the age that we live in is there's so much you can do within your control to make yourself happy, resilient, increase your wellness and your outcomes. But a big part of it is this knowledge base, and picking
Mhm.
up this kind of knowledge from programs like this is a huge, win for everybody.
And the silver lining to the pandemic is that we have this ability now to step back and shift what we've been doing. We're seeing a lot of things that were doing were not serving us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it gave a lot of people pause. So now learning things like this is really incredible. And I want to say you didn't tell me to mention this at all, but I found you through some of your studies. There's multiple studies that you've done on um, microbiome and obesity, COVID, all these things that led me to your products, which you
Mm-hmm.
didn't tell me anything to talk about at all.
Yeah.
But I have been using your products and I love it. And I think that that's one easy thing that I've been able to change for myself
Yeah.
for my microbiome and gut health. That if you would like to, mamas at home, I'll put a link below.
Okay.
Of course, he didn't tell me to say this, so there's no obligation, but I just think it would make it easier for a lot of busy moms to just have these things that you can use, you can take that are already packaged, that come
Yeah.
with really researched science. That to me is like, this makes sense.
Yeah.
It's not just some fad out there. This makes sense. So it's coming from the bottom of my heart that I'm saying this, that I think
Thank
it'd be easy for moms to do.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, we didn't discuss that at all as talking
Not at
about
all.
products even. But to me, the products are a product of a culmination of knowledge and information, right? Research and all that. And then ultimately, how do you exercise research and knowledge and all that? You can do it in easy ways through product if the products are done right, and that's kind of why we got into products to begin with, is because you know there's lots of things we can teach people to do that don't involve products, which will help. But then ultimately, some of the really key changes that need to happen in your gut, in your immune system, and all that can be done very effectively and simply through products, right?
Mhm.
Assuming the products are made well. So that's why we even got into products to begin with, because it's our way of providing people with a tool that they can use to really improve things that are going on in their system and in their lives. So thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, it's really based on providing you more and more tools with the knowledge that we provide with the products. Those are all tools in your tool chest to improve your life.
And what I want to say is that as you said, I'm curating this information. I could tell from the studies that you did, because I covered medical and health for NBC and CBS, that these were real studies that led to inform these products. And that's why I brought you on here or invited you on here, is because I think having real information and also easy ways to do things is so helpful for families. So,
Totally, yeah.
that's why I
Yeah,
had to
thank you
mention
so
that.
much. And I have one talent. If I were ever in a talent show, I would be terrible at the talent portion, because I can't sing, I can't dance, I can't draw, I can't juggle, I can't do anything that resembles talent. But there's one skill I have, and that skill is taking highly complex scientific information and making it understandable to people, right? And I've had that ever since I was a kid. One of my number one jobs in college was as a tutor, a science tutor, because I understood the science really well. And then I actually tutored people like athletes and all that to
Mm.
help them understand the science a little bit better. So, another reason I love these kind of programs is I'm basically taking, thousands of research papers worth of science in a conversation like this and boiling it down to the most important aspects that you really have to understand, that will make a difference, and so that's my one talent, and I get to exercise it so in these kind of programs. So thank you.
I love that you're coming at this, from a standpoint for the right reasons to present these things. So I want you to tell us where we can find your product if we would like to.
Yeah, so come visit us at microbiomelabs.com. That's labs with an S. That's our main website. We basically sell to health practitioners in general, but we have some affiliates and people that we engage with that make the products readily available to consumers. We also have some product available through other retail channels, which you can find through the microbiomelabs.com website. If you find a practitioner and put your location in. I know in Maui, we sell some of our products at a couple of the pharmacies
Okay, cool.
there. I know in what's that region where
Wailea?
Wailea, yeah.
The
There's
Wailea
a
Pharmacy?
pharmacy over there. Yep, I think
Mhm,
in
mhm.
Wailea Pharmacy, yeah. And so if you put in your zip code, your postal code, it'll bring up some of the places that sell it.
Awesome.
And then if you want to hear any more information about my talks and all that, if you put my name in YouTube, Kiran Krishnan, you'll find hundreds and hundreds of videos that people have very kindly uploaded. Or even if you put it in Google, you'll find lots and lots of interviews, podcasts, and all that other people have uploaded on different topics. And I talk a lot about a lot of different things as it relates to the microbiome. So, and then on social media, even though I'm not on there that much and that well, and I'm not one of the social media type of engaged health people, but I do try to engage with people if they send me a request on social media. So on Facebook, it's my regular name, Kiran Krishnan. On Instagram, it's K Kiran, so it's KKIRAN _00. I know it's the worst handle ever, but I chose it when I knew nothing about Instagram, and that was that's part of my email address, and so I just put that, and it's really hard to tell people what it is.
We'll put it below anyway.
Yes, please add it below. So if you send me a request to connect on any of those, I really try to connect and engage with people as much as I can if they send me messages on there. Just again, all in that kind of dedication to helping empower people with information.
That's so awesome. Well, this has been great. And I want to know now, finally, where are you zooming off to today?
Yes. So I'm here in the western suburbs of Chicago, and as soon as we are done, it's evening time here, so it's like 6:15 p.m. So there's probably another hour and a half of daylight. Probably go downstairs and play some soccer with my son because he's really into soccer right now and wants to practice as much as he can. So I'm going to go and show him how to really play some soccer.
That's so awesome. Well, thank you so, so much. I literally feel like I can navigate this world better with COVID and beyond for my health and my family's health. So, really, thank you so much.
My pleasure.